guys, Constance here from Cosmopolitan Cornbread. So today I am working in the kitchen once again. That's where I'm spending a lot of time nowadays. And today I'm processing tomatoes. I'm working on tomato sauce. And in order to make tomato sauce, you've got to de-skin, de-seed, and all that tomatoes. Now, a couple years ago, I invested in one of these. This is a food mill. And it's basically like a bottomless saucepan. It has a hand crank here that moves the food around and pushes it through this screen, leaving behind the seeds, the skins, and all of that. And for the most part, it works okay. Here's the problem. Everything's sitting in here like this. So that means not only is your food coming down through here, but then all of the seeds, all of the pulp is just kind of sitting here on top. And I found it's a challenge to use this. It was inexpensive. It does come with different screens, so you've got really fine ones and really coarse ones. But I decided to invest in a better one. And so that's the one that I'm using today. And I love it. I'm so glad I got it. It is called the Johnny Applesauce Maker, and of course you can use it for apples, but if you look at the picture, it's got tomatoes on there. Now they do actually have a motorized version, and I had thought about getting that one, except you can't find it anywhere right now. But this one was available, and honestly it's really easy to use, so I'm not wishing I had the motorized one at all. So let me show you how this one works. Alright, so we have the great big hopper up on top, and this is your little tool for pushing the food down into the hole, just a little hollow plastic thing. And of course, like any food mill, it's going to come down in here and then it goes through a grinding giant screw sort of system that pushes the food finer and finer, so that all of the juices and the pulp and everything comes through this screen that is currently really covered with tomato pulp, but you can kind of see it in there. And they do have different screens that you can get. Mr. Smith actually just ran to the post office to pick up my other ones that just came in the mail. So there's different sized screens. It all comes down onto this little chute here and into a dish. So this is all tomato juice and tomato pulp, which I will cook down into tomato sauce. And over here on the side you have this spout, this little cone sort of shape, and that is all of the skins and the seeds of the tomatoes, and they just kind of plop right down into my little waste bowl. So it is super easy to use, and I am so glad that I got it. And this isn't a sponsored post or anything. This food mill company isn't paying me to say this. I do get a lot of questions about the tools and things that I use for processing all of the foods, all of the things that come out of the garden. And I'm all about making my life a little bit simpler, and if sharing the information with you that I learn, the trial and errors, helps you, maybe saves you a little bit of money and energy, then I'm all about it. Because like I said, this food mill, it's fine. It was very economical. It didn't cost much money, but it is a little bit more work, and I just found that the other style of food mill works a lot better in my opinion. So if you can only find this kind, if you can only afford one of these, it's going to work. It'll be just fine. But if you've got a little bit of extra money and you can find one available, I would say get one in that style that I'm using today. Now, something else that I get asked about is the tomatoes themselves. When you have some really funky shaped tomatoes, like this one right here. Now, this is what happens when you have fused blossoms, where there's multiple tomato blossoms that essentially are growing stuck together like Siamese twins. It's just a malformation of the blossom. Sometimes it happens. If you pluck that blossom off, then the energy in that plant is going to go towards the other blossoms and to grow other tomatoes. So as a general rule, I tend to try and pluck off most of those blossoms. It never fails, I'm always going to miss some. And when you miss those, this is what happens. You get these weird shaped tomatoes that are actually multiple tomatoes in one. And you can kind of see, like, here's a tomato and here's a tomato. And what happens when you have a tomato like this is where it grows together, where those joints are, a lot of times you have a really hard piece of tomato that's really not usable. I mean, you can't really slice this up for sandwiches or anything like that, so what do you do with them? Well, you can dice them up for salsa and just discard the hard pieces, but when you're making tomato sauce, doesn't matter what your tomatoes look like. So making tomato sauce is a great way of using tomatoes that you might not ordinarily be able to use. Another question that I get is about the cracking. A lot of times you will have tomatoes that will crack on top. And for the most part, this is usually caused by extreme heat, or it can be caused by uneven watering. I tend to mulch all of my garden, and that helps with keeping a consistent moisture level in the soil, keeps it from drying out completely. But when you have extreme temperatures and then you get massive rainstorms, it doesn't matter what you do, that is going to cause uneven watering. Sometimes there's nothing you can do because Mother Nature has her own mind. So what happens is you end up with tomatoes that have cracked on top. Now, these tomatoes aren't pretty, but as long as there's no rot or anything like that, then the tomato is basically scabbed up. Of course, you wouldn't want to eat this part of the tomato, but again, when you're making tomato sauce, it doesn't matter what your tomatoes look like. This is a great way to use these funky tomatoes that you might not ordinarily want to use. These are like the seconds, you know, those pieces of produce that get tossed aside and nobody wants to use them because they're not pretty, but they're totally edible. You just cut off the parts that don't look good, eat the rest. But in this case, since I'm making tomato sauce, I can pretty much use the whole thing. Alright, so I'm just going to go through and I'm going to cut the tomatoes into chunks. Now they say you can put the tomato in whole, stems and all, but personally I just don't like doing that. So I just take this little chunk and I cut it out and discard it. And then the rest of the tomato, I just cut it into chunks that are about 1 inch or 2 in size and put them up into the hopper. It's just really that easy. Now, because the top of this particular tomato is really scabbed up from the cracking, I'm just going to cut off the top part of it and discard that, and then use the rest of the tomato to go into the mill. Now, even though the picture on the box showed whole tomatoes going in there, yeah, I don't do that. Like I said, I don't put the stem through there. And frankly, you need the tomatoes to fit down through the funnel of the hopper on this food mill. And if the tomatoes are bigger than the hopper, you're going to use this to push them down, and what's going to happen is the tomato is going to burst and you're going to have tomato juice flying everywhere. So I just cut the tomatoes into chunks that will more easily fit through that hopper, and so there's less mess. See the pretty streaky color of these Berkeley pink tie-dye tomatoes. And now you just turn the handle and slowly push the tomatoes down through the hole. Alright you guys, so I just came in from working outside in the garden again, doing another big harvest. All of those tomatoes, I don't even know how many pounds, gobs and gobs of tomatoes that went through the food mill today have been on the stove simmering nice and low so that they could reduce down and create a nice rich tomato sauce. And I'm actually getting ready to can that up real quick. Since it's not pressure canned, it's just hot water bath canned or steam canned. It doesn't take too long to do that, so I'll do that here real quick before I go to bed. But I just want to show you the tomato haul from today. So my Hoosier counter was completely cleared off. Everything was cleared off. And this is from just now out there in the garden. Even though I have lost a lot of my tomato plants, I've had to pull things out because they were just done with. As you can see, the Dr. Weish tomatoes are just prolific producers. They give so many tomatoes. It is insane. That is one of the reasons I will grow them every year, just because we get such a great bounty of these tomatoes. These here are mostly the tie-dye, Berkeley pink tie-dye tomatoes. Some of these are, I think, Robisons, like this one right here. That's a Paul Robeson tomato. I actually didn't get a ton of those, got a good bit of them, but definitely it's Dr. Weish is again the winner. It was last year, not only in the size, but also just the quantity, the sheer volume of tomatoes that we got. And once again, it's the favorite. Here are the cucumbers that have gotten picked, and I'm going to be turning these into pickles. And then I'm going to make some more zucchini bread jam out of some of this zucchini. And then I still haven't gotten around to making Mr. Smith's zucchini cake, so I will use a couple of those to make him his cake. So a lot of the stuff has been slowing down as far as production goes. I'm still getting gobs of peppers and quite a bit of tomatoes, but this coming week is going to be a big planting week. There's going to be a lot of stuff going in. It is kind of the deadline for getting things in, a lot of the things. So things like beans and peas will all be getting planted this coming week. The fall garden, while there's still a lot of stuff that we will be able to harvest, it's a little bit easier. One thing I have noticed already, amazingly, is my pest pressure has backed off a little bit. So I think the steps that I've been taking have been helping, and yeah, the aphids have pretty much gone away, the thrips have gone away, and I haven't actually been seeing any worms either. So that's pretty exciting. It's nice to have that break after it's been such an atrocious year as far as the pest pressure goes. So things are looking up just a little bit. So with that, I'm going to get cleaned up and I'm going to get to work on jarring up and processing the tomato sauce.